Hey, Jacob here with Cutthroat Anglers again, back for another Tuesday Ties. Today we're going to be taking a look at this hothead jig hare's ear nymph tied with a matte pink tungsten bead. I've had a few local anglers stopping into the shop asking for me to get these matte pink beads in to tie this fly, so I figured I would give it a go. Alright, let's do a quick run through of the materials we're going to use to tie this nymph today. For hooks, we're going to use some size 18 jig hooks. These ones are Partridge Ideal jig hook. The bead, 3/32 of an inch matte pink tungsten slotted bead from Hairline Dubbin. Going to use a little bit of extra weight, some .015 lead wire. For our thread, we're going to try to match the color of the bead, or at least something that's similar. I'm going to use a Vivus 10-0 purple thread. For a tail, we're going to use some Spirit River UV2 Coq de Leon, great tailing material. To build the body of this fly, some natural Hares Ear dub from Hairline Dubbin. We're going to use some medium ultra wire in Sculpin Olive to segment that body. And then I'm going to use some turkey feather for a wing case. We're going to use some Loon UV Knot Sense as a nice thick resin to make a bubble back on that wing case. Alright, so a quick run through of the tools we're going to use today. Some rising razor scissors, CNF Designs whip finish, a Stonfo adjustable drag tension bobbin, and then a homemade bodkin, or basically needle with a handle, and also a UV light to cure up our UV resin. Alright, jumping into the tying. Already have our bead on our hook. Now we're going to add some of that .015 lead wire. It's only going to take a few wraps, but it's easier to have a longer piece just to tie it in. Start a little bit away from the bead, wrap probably 5 or 6 times. That leaves me enough room to pinch it off with my fingernail so the bead doesn't get in the way. Then you want to make sure you get your slotted bead snugged all the way up onto the eye of the jig hook. Use that lead wire to push it up and snug it onto there. Then I'm going to come in with my bobbin and thread, tie my thread in directly behind that lead wire, and I'm actually going to use the thread to put some tension back towards the bead. And what that's going to do is really lock that lead wire in there, and then I'll come in and do a couple wraps on the wire itself, and then that wire is really locked in there, not going anywhere. Next, you want to lay down a thin thread base, cover up that wire a little bit, get rid of any pointy ends. You don't want to add too much thickness towards the back of the fly, but just lay down a little bit of a thread base. Now we're going to tie in some of our Spirit River UV2 Coq de Leon for our tail. Just grab about 3 to 6 of those fibers by the tips, cut them off at the butts, measure out how long you want them, and tie them in. I try to keep them nice and right on top of the hook shank as I'm tying these backwards. Just hold them by the tips and make sure they stay right on top of the hook as I work the thread back. Take them all the way back right to where you stopped your thread base. You don't want to go past the start of the curve of the hook there. I like to keep it right on the straight part of the shank. Cut off your butt ends. Now we're going to tie in our ultra wire. Do a couple wraps loose, pull it to where I want it, then really snug it down. Same thing with this as the tails. I hold it in place as I work the thread back to keep it in line with the hook shank the entire way. I like to keep it right on the side of the hook shank. Right back to that tie-in point. And now we are going to utilize what's called the split thread technique. So you can see how that bobbin is just spinning on its own. I didn't even touch it. Basically what's happening there is the tension from the thread is loosening up, so that's why it's spinning. It's always going to spin counterclockwise to the left when you let it hang, because it loosens that way. And so what we actually want to happen here is for this thread to loosen up, and I want to be able to split it into pieces, or basically to split it in half so I can put materials inside of that thread and make basically a dubbing loop without having to make the loop. Using your bodkin, your smooth needle here, you can actually speed that process along by running it up and down along the thread as it spins, and it helps to flatten it out. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom back in so you can see how I split this thread a little better. Alright, so taking a closer look at this split thread technique now, we already have let our thread spin counterclockwise and unwind a bit and helped it loosen up with your bodkin. So now we're going to do the actual splitting of the thread. So I use my bodkin again here, and I'll come in and put my finger in between my fly and my bodkin, putting a little bit of tension down on my bobbin, the thread holder, and then I'll run my bodkin, the needle, up the thread. You can see how it's laying out pretty smooth there, or pretty flat rather. And you can actually lay it across your fingernail and it's laid out nice and flat there. Then you take your pointy needle end of your bodkin, try to put it as much as you can right in the middle of that thread, and it will split into two pieces. You can see that nice opening there in my thread, so you still have your thread and your bobbin. You just have an opening there, and you can put whatever kind of dubbing and etc. you want in there. In this case, we're going to be using our hare's ear dubbing and put it right into that opening. Not going to need a whole lot, just a little pinch. Estimating the length you need here is one of the tricky parts. You can always pull material out of it though if you get it too long. So I'll take a little bit of dubbing, pinch it in my left hand, and keep my finger in that loop to open it up. Spread some of that dubbing up into the loop. Take out any extra dubbing you might feel like you have in there. And once you have it in there, you can let that loop close up around the dubbing. And then I will zoom out again here so you can see the next part as well. So you can see we have our hare's ear dubbing actually inside of our thread now. It's locked into there. Now all I have to do is tighten the thread back up, so spin it the opposite way that you loosened it, spin it to the right clockwise, and that dubbing will be spun in a nice tight loop actually inside of your thread. I like to hold on to the thread right above the bobbin, then give it a little bit of a spin to start off there. And then you can sit back and let it spin into a bit of a dubbing rope. For this abdomen, we want it a little bit of a tight rope so it'll give it a segmented look. So I'm actually going to help it get a little tighter by twisting it with my fingers too. You can adjust your rope, you can pull pieces out, you can squeeze it tighter together. Now we have a nice tight little dubbing rope that I'm happy with. And we'll go ahead and zoom back in here. All right, now all I have to do is just wind this dubbing rope onto here, split thread dubbing loop, just like you would wrap your thread for it. Makes it really easy. Try to build up a taper from thin to thick as you work your way up. And you're going to stop that right about the 3/4 mark up the hook shank toward the bead. Then we're going to come in with our ultra wire that we already have tied in and make some nice segmentations. Probably want to get a good 3 to 4 wraps showing here. Tie the wire off on either side, get it in there nice and secure so that you don't have any problem twisting it off. I'll trim up the scragglies a little bit on the abdomen. Now we're going to tie in our wing case material, which can be our turkey feather. Want to try to select enough of these fibers here that it's going to be about the thickness as the width of your fly there on top. You want to try to keep these on top of the nymph and kind of spread out across the width of it. Tie it in at that 3/4 mark. Then cut off your butt ends. Make sure you got everything tied in there well. Move your thread back to the 3/4 mark. And then we are going to do another split thread dubbing loop to build the thorax. So same thing as we did with the abdomen there. Letting my thread spin to the left counterclockwise to loosen, using my bodkin to help loosen it. Once I see it start to flatten out, lay it across my fingernail. Try to split it down the middle. You can see that split. Grab some more dubbing. Get it in your loop. And spin your bobbin till your loop is where you want it. This one I'm going to leave a little shaggier because it's going to imitate the legs of this bug, as well as you want to build a bit of a thorax ball. As I wrap the thorax, I pull the loose fibers to the back as you wrap. And wrap it forward to the bead. Get those fibers preened back. Put a couple wraps of thread in there. Then we're going to bring our wing case forward and tie it off. We also want to try to get these loose hare's ear fibers kind of preened down to the sides of the wing case. So I pull the wing case forward. Hare's ear fibers to the side and back. Then as I grab the wing case feathers by the tip, bring the thread around, lock them in right behind the bead. Trim your tips. Give it a little trim. And whip finish. You could call it quits there. Like I said, I'm going to trim it up a little bit and add some of that UV resin on the wing case. Coming in with that UV knot sense. You want to get a bubble of it right on the wing case. You can see how this stuff is nice and thick. It's not soaking in, it's just sitting on top. Bubble like that's probably about all you need. Use a bodkin to coat that entire wing case and get it over the thread onto the bead so that it locks the thread in. And once you're happy with that, come in with your UV light and cure it up. And there you have your hothead hare's ear nymph.